Howdy, folks. How y'all doing out there? Welcome to another book reading Sunday. I'm going to have to figure out a way of calling the title of these. Don't know what I called it CheeZ Productions. Did I call it CheeZ Productions in the picture? I think I did. Something like that. I'll be the studio one day. CheeZ, maybe not. Fondue Films. Dude, that's a good name. That's for I don't know really what I'm talking about. Maybe when this gets turned into a movie. Welcome to another audiobook. This is chapter 1, much less preamble before we go into this one because it's a whole chapter rather than just a prologue. Which I hope you guys like. Thank you very much for the support you have shown to it. Prologue gave like a tiny snapshot of what's going on in the book. Tons of stuff not even hinted at or alluded at or anything like that. And I'm not 100% sure if I've written the prologue that well in that case. So I might have to rewrite that at some point. So you guys have seen stuff that might be deleted scenes, basically. I don't know. But yes, this is chapter 1. So it's going to be longer than the last one. Hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you guys are having a lovely Sunday. Again, this is like something I'm going to try and keep recording on Sunday mornings. I say morning. It is like 11 o'clock, but if I stayed in bed any longer, I think it's going to rain. And if I did, then I would just stay in bed listening to the rain for quite a few hours, I think. But anyway, enjoy. Chapter 1. Enter the Shadow. Millennia, a once lush and beautiful paradise. A planet of vast valleys of fresh grass, bright and vibrant forests whose trees reached high to the sun, whose seas of clear tranquility teemed with life bursting from its depths. Now, a corrupt mirror of its former self. Valleys had turned to desert wastes, forests had turned to dangerous gauntlets of death, and the seas, once so clear, hid more dangers still in their dark, murky depths. Such was the history of the planet, for at its core it possessed an energy source like no other. A radiant fuel that invigorated and sustained life on the surface. Originally, this energy was harnessed by the Forerunners, the first people to discover the planet. They utilized great wells they built to give them access to the source of limitless potential. It allowed them to build incredible cities and develop advanced technologies, to build lives of peace that coexisted with the life force that spread far and wide across the surface of millennia. In time, the Dark Ones came, and everything changed. A race of the stars whose only purpose was spreading like a parasite and consuming all they came into contact with. Even to these ravenous beings, millennia was a mighty prize. The Dark Ones landed and war ensued. At first, the upper hand went to the Dark Ones with their machines of war and skillful destruction, but quickly the Forerunners turned their own ability for crafting technology into making tools and weapons to defend themselves. The war raged for many cycles, and in the end, we don't know any more or less than we do right now. Planet's gone to shit, people dying left and right, king on the throne is a nutcase, and I'm stuck carrying the bags for this fossil. Remy muttered to himself, closing the book of the lost for what felt like the millionth time. Remy was, in his terms, a glorified chauffeur and bag carrier for the seer, or as he called her, the old fossil. Remy was a young man, soft-faced with a warm smile. He was comfortably built these days, having spent much of his time driving the seer from location to location. He'd gotten far too complacent. But his job wasn't to fight, anyway. That was the job of the 4 guards, who at the moment were setting up their camp for the night. Elin paced around the ground as she often did, moving her hands slowly through the air. Here and there, Remy caught little glimpses of a spark of white or a flicker of blue. He may joke and sound unappreciative at times, but he knew there was something special to this lady. There was a power to her that he did not understand. Everywhere they went, she was revered. She brought a little bit of hope, which right now was in short supply. He glanced back at the book and returned it to the cushion in Elin's tent. He read it now and again, but the passages of the past never relayed any new information to him. One day, he would have to ask her how she'd gotten hold of such a valuable book from the regulator library, but not tonight. It had been a long day, and he had set up the tents, cooked the dinners, and finally cleaned and fed the trumps, the stocky four-legged beasts who pulled their hover carts. They had 6 of the creatures, tamed by one of their guards, hairy-hooved, slightly boisterous, with 2 curved short but sharp horns on each side of their head. Quite why these creatures had been chosen only became clear later in their time together. He had been sound asleep one night, dreaming such a lovely dream, when he was awoken by screeches the likes of which he had never heard before, but would never forget. They occasionally still crept into his nightmares. He had woken with a start to find that they had moved location again, out of the sandy seas and onto a rocky plateau, looking down on their would-be campsite. He remembered the cold gaze of the hunter, standing just next to the opening to his cart.
"Waste worms. We were lucky to get out of the hunting ground,"
he had said quietly to Remy, who could not take his eyes off the scene. In the flickering light of their campfire, huge grey bodies writhed and burrowed. As he looked through the binocs, he caught a glimpse of a sight that accompanied the sound in his dreams. The gaping maw of the worm, its rings of teeth that moved as the body did to saw through their prey. Why the worms had not followed their steps on the sand was because of the trumps. Their hairy-hooved feet muffled the vibrations and left Lily no trace for the sand upon the sand to be followed. After that night, Remy had found a new appreciation for the creatures, but still, it had been a long day, and he bid everyone else good night before turning in. For Elian, however, sleep was the last thing on her mind. She didn't talk much to anyone these days, but the planet spoke to her. Elian was the seer, possibly one of the last seers, or at least she had never met any others. She had a connection to Millennia that she could not put into words for anyone else to understand. But what she felt was warm and good and right. She felt its ebbs and flows, its pulses and waves, and she felt every bit of its pain as the darkness continued to grow. But tonight, something was different. There was a presence so familiar, so dark, darker than anything the planet had already felt. An explosion of red and black sent a shockwave through her connection, knocking her off her feet and sliding away through the sands. She couldn't feel the warmth anymore. 2 of the hunters rushed over to her to make sure she was okay. In her mind's eye, though, she was staring back into those cold, soulless stones. Sparks of red flickering in their bottomless pits. Elin lay there, gasping for breath, as far across the sand, a shadow that had not smelt a millennia's sky in many a cycle, opened its eyes and took its first breath. The shadow was awake again. Ian awoke with a start the next morning, lying on the bed in her tent. Remy was sitting hunched in a chair close to her side. He was a little strange. Itchy feet, always wanting to be doing something. She knew that for this young man, being so far away from the fight was hard for him, especially with who his father was. She was incredibly grateful to have him on her side. Always, through thick and thin, he was by her side. He gave her plenty of stick, but no matter what, he was always there for her. Just like now. His eyes snapped open as she stirred. He had watered her hand in a second and was knelt next to her, putting the glass into her hand. She smiled at him, gulping it down gratefully, and set the empty flask back on the table. "Are you okay? I've never seen you like that before. Nick said you flew. Off your feet, you were skipping through the sand. Like you'd just been shocked or smacked or something." Remy looked scared, and she knew why. He was a pragmatist, a realist. Faith was not his thing. He knew she could do something, but he had never really been a believer in the energy of this world. So whenever something happened that was intangible, something he couldn't see or fight, it always sent him into a bit of a spiral. I'm fine, sweet boy, she smiled. A little knocked, but nothing that's going to slow me down for long. What happened? Remy asked. You wouldn't believe me if I told you, she smiled sadly. I'll try to, he responded quietly. Elin looked at him for a long moment, and it was possibly the most earnest he had sounded about wanting to believe. They're back, she said simply. The dark ones. Remy glanced at the book on the cushion that he'd been reading last night. It was true he had never been a believer, not out of choice, but there were skeletons in his closet when it came to the regulators and their cult. But his mother had believed. And she had told him stories when he'd been a boy of the deepest darkness and the brightest lights. Of a threat that had cleared this planet of life a long time ago. That's all just stories. It was part statement, part question. Said in the voice of someone trying, hopefully, to cling on to a word without another thing to be scared of. As if just by saying it, he could make it true. No. They're very much real. It was a very matter-of-fact tone that Elin was taking with Remy. And if anything, it irritated him more. How are you being so calm about this? He stood up and began pacing. This has been going on for how long and no one has been done anything about the regulators? He felt sick thinking that they were his first thought for protection from this darkness, but what else were they there for? Elin just smiled at him from her spot on the bed. Why are you still smiling? Sit down, Remy, she said. Her tone was inviting, but there was a firmness there. For the last 8 months, we've been travelling together, staying ahead of the regulators searching for us, ahead of Elias. Making our way through the peril-infested wasteland, and you have never shown an ounce of believing in something more, something beyond what you can see in front of your face. Tonight, having seen me knocked off my feet, you finally start to believe. I should have had this happen months ago, she chuckled. Doesn't seem like something to laugh about, Remy muttered ruefully. No, she agreed. It does not. What I'm going to tell you is known to a few, your father being one of them. Dad believes? Still? Even after... His voice trailed off. He and his father had never spoken about what had happened to his mother. But he kind of just assumed that even after what happened to your mother, your father's faith has never wavered. It's why we have been out here for so long, searching. Elin continued. Searching for what? I don't know. She smiled, but continued quickly, seeing Remy starting to get worked up again. But I have an idea. And the planet, up till now, has been my guide. Well, it's taken its sweet time about it. 8 months and we've got nothing to show for it. But stand in our shoes. And a long journey of steps behind us. The Book of the Lost. The real Book of the Lost, she hastened to add, as he glanced again at the book on the cushion. Speaks of a weapon. Something that at the right time would forge the light of a soul into a shield for the living. When times are at their darkest and the last ray of hope is the only spark left. That last part was a quote from the original book when Elin had been a regulator herself. She had stolen this copy of the tome when she had learned the corruption at the very core of the religion she had held so dearly in her heart. The cult wasn't something new. It had been around for millennia at this stage. but it had turned from what it was supposed to be. The original teachings still burned within her, and a few others that she knew. She'd intended to find this weapon, whatever it was, for just this moment. So all this time, we've been looking for a weapon, something that will take a life and save the rest of us, Remy asked. Yes. He was taking so readily to this. In truth, it had taken her many readings to the passage to understand that a price was to be paid to save the many. Or at least that is what the prophecy said. And exactly what is it supposed to be saving us from? Darkness. Something which you cannot imagine. Which I saw last night. Remy's eyes widened. Somewhere in this world, something has woken up. And what comes next, I cannot begin to guess. Wait, what? But you have the book. You're the seer. Are you supposed to know these things? Remy leapt up again. I am not an antenna, she returned bluntly. Sorry, he grinned. I don't feel like we are anywhere close to finding this weapon, and now we have something else that is going to be causing more pain and destruction out there. And we don't have it hard enough. Elias sends his sentinels to hunt for us. We have monstrous creatures out there. I'm sorry. He dropped onto the bed, holding his head in his hands. Do we have any good news? He said into his palms. Well, we know it's coming. And we know we have a chance to beat it. That's hope. Right now, I think we could all use a bit more hope. She smiled at him warmly. The pair were quiet for a long moment. What was it like? Remy whispered. The darkness. Ian thought for a moment before replying. Cold. Coldness I have never felt in my life. One that drank in everything good and alive. The bleakness so bottomless. I thought it was going to drown right there and then. And I was on the sand, and it felt like the first gasp of breath. But the world, my connection to it, it feels like an echo, distant. She reached out her hand, and Remy grabbed it quickly. I don't think you should reach out till we know what we're dealing with. He blushed and let go of her hand quickly. He smiled at the boy. After all they'd been through, but he was right. Last time, it felt like the world had thrown her free. To protect her, somehow. She might not get that lucky twice. Somewhere else, darkness was spreading. Amelia slept restlessly that night. It had been a long day on the back of several long days. She joined the regulators because it meant automatic citizenship for her and her family. And in her case, that meant her little sister and her aunt. They weren't a rich family, but she did okay for herself. She was comfortable. Her parents had made sure of that. But with citizenship, she could move her family out of the Crucible into Haven, where they would have protection from the thugs inside and the creatures outside. Unfortunately, that life of relative comfort had made her ill-equipped for the first few years of being a regulator, which meant world duty. Monotonous tasks, repetitive, utility jobs, checking on pipes, keeping an eye on the dials, maintenance. She almost looked forward to the occasional attacks by the stranded. Those casts from society, desperately trying to find somewhere to hold up in a sandstorm, or somewhere to make their home. When they came knocking, they came with guns. She would occasionally rush up to the wall to help with defense, and it proved a nice break to her day. Amelia understood the desire for home. Hell, she had the same desire for her sister and her aunt, but she could not let that get in the way of her duty. She just had to do her time here until she was bumped up the ranks a little further and could get out. If her superior ever recommended her, that was. It had been hard for her here. It was her own fault sometimes. She did not try to make friends with any of them. With where they had come from, let's just say her auntie would not have approved of her hanging out with them anytime soon. So she was mostly on her own, doing her jobs on her own, eating alone. At least this was something most of them did alone, sleeping. Tonight, though, something was different. Her dreams kept shifting, slipping. She was falling into a dark, shadowy space. She fell slowly, not a scary fall. Felt more like floating and drifting, like on a soft breeze. She hadn't felt this light in a long time. It felt comfortable again, like a weight was just lifted off her shoulders. God, did that feel better. Not having to worry about her families or her responsibilities, her duty, as they called it. She just floated in a gentle, warm embrace, relaxed and open. She heard it then, or felt it. She was not sure. Something was moving around her, encircling her. It was her shadow. She laughed. Of course it was her shadow. She always had her shadow of no one else. With a comforting familiarity, that sensation of being wrapped trickled down her spine, and then the shadow spoke to her, in a voice very much like her own, but with a small echo to it. "Hello, Amelia," its voice said, soft and gentle. "Hello," she replied, sleepy but happy. "Do you recognize me?" it asked. "Yeah, you're me. My shadow, anyway." She smiled, stretching in the warmth of the embrace. Good, good. The words stretched out into the silence of the space, taking on a deeper note and a slight reverberation. But still, Amelia felt enraptured and safe in the voice. I've been alone for such a long time. Just like you, Amelia. I've been waiting. I've been tired. The voice had turned entirely now. It shook her bones and sent a chill of ice down her back. Where she once felt light enough to float, she now felt heavy and began to drown in the closing darkness. Last thing she heard, in the voice of her ending, shaking through her soul, in its hollow and hateful tones. I have been hungry. She opened her eyes, and what once were light amber pupils now were a deep pool of black. Amelia stood, walked over to the mirror, examining her body. This would do for now. Sen had a gift when it came to getting into the minds of the uninitiated. Could feel desire and fear, and as soon as they felt an opening, they could slip into the mind and take control of the body. Sen had access to memories and knowledge when he took over a person's soul. They didn't die. He could feel them stir and occasionally push back if they were strong enough. But he had this one, and she would be his tool to get into the well and regain his strength. Sen remembered these halls well from when his people had fought their way through many, many years ago. The fighting had been fierce and glorious. Many of their dark brothers and sisters had died giving their bodies in pursuit of this energy. And now, Sen would have it all for themselves. The body of Amelia stepped confidently across the passages to where she knew the gate controls were, where they were in every other well. Sen had stirred seeds in several others on the planet of Millennia. Among those who called themselves the Stranded no more, it seemed, for someone had brought together the disparate tribes under one banner for exactly this purpose. But Sen was going to roll out the welcome wagon for them. Stronger though he was becoming, he was nowhere near the warrior he had used to be. Even this girl was proving to be troublesome. To maintain control and connection was taking up most of his concentration. He would need tools, an army. Fortunately, manipulation was his greatest asset. Of all other Dark Ones, Sen had a intelligence and an intent that they did not possess. It had helped him to climb quickly within their society, and in the end, it had kept him alive. Amelia, a voice came from above. Those creatures had rigged up some sort of announcement system in these uncivilized people. What are you doing up this late? Just fancied a walk in the fresh air, she smiled up at the control booth. Not going to be able to let you out tonight. We're picking up some unusual activity out there this evening. Looks like Stranded are going to try their luck again. Amelia walked up the stairs to the side of the control room and came in behind the occupants. One guy asleep in a chair, the other, who had addressed her, hunched over a setup of cameras and scanners. A gun was sitting just next to the guard's hand. 2. Just 2. And they weren't even really watching her. She had strolled into the room without them giving her a second look. It was simple and quick, taking a knife from the guard's belt and plunging it into the side of his neck before he'd been able to do anything, let alone wheel around with his gun in hand. Sen kept the knife buried in the man's throat as he grabbed hold of the man's hand with the gun in, gently staring into the guard's eyes all the while with those cold, soulless ones. The guard's hand lowered to the point, steadily at his friend's head. A flicker of a smile on the face of the young girl, and the gun fired. The knife tore through the throat, leaving both guards to fall to the floor, life slipping away. Sen pressed a button on the panel, small and red, and took a seat in the vacated and slightly smoking chair to wait for his army to arrive as the thick metal blast doors of the well opened to the desert beyond. Pax's hand reached for its third cup of kaf of the night. Third of 4 regular cups. Every night, Pax was a good-looking guy, at 6'2", broad shoulders, strong and lean, green eyes and short black hair, with a thick stubble. He'd been here for a long time, and had built up quite a routine to make his post somewhat comfortable. The wells were posting for the initiates of the regulators, Jobs of maintenance to teach them patience. Is what his instructors always told him anyway. Managed by old regulators who had had their day and were looking for quiet postings to live out the rest of their lives, passing on their knowledge to the next generation. Sometimes those injured would be sent to the wells, where they could still do some good. But for someone like Pax, just hitting 30 to be sent to a well meant only one thing. He had pissed off someone in the higher-ups. A few months ago, Pax had publicly called out a commander of the Regulator Security Force on an inspection into a death at a munitions factory. Pax had stumbled upon a story where a captain had been attempting to pressure a young girl into coming back to his place. In the ensuing struggle, the captain gunned down another worker. Several others had been injured, slowing down the processes of the factory. The investigation had led to a house in the downtown area, or what was left of it. Pax had tracked back an order that sent no support for a pickup to the address, and destruction left behind. He had had no choice but to bring it all to the attention of his superiors. However, when nothing happened to the Sentinels, and then nothing happened to the captain either, Pax needed to know what the hell was going on. At first, one of his brothers had quietly taken him aside and told him, in his best interest, to stop asking questions before someone higher up caught wind and took him to task. Pax had not stopped. Pax kept pushing until he had found the reason for the cover-up. The captain was the son of the Grand Regulator. The story had been swept under the rug, but Pax kept digging into other things the captain had been involved in and found related stories elsewhere. In the end, he was taken before a court of several high-ranking regulators and asked to stop digging. When he had refused, he quickly got his paperwork through that he was being reassigned. Out of Haven, the center of regulator activity, into a well, far away from the action, far away from being able to do anything. So, he had done what he could to instill in the new recruits that had passed through the right values. But so many of these kids were joining the regulators more to protect themselves than out of a desire to protect anyone else. It was so different to how things were when he had been growing up, but these days, the level of fear out in the streets, not just from the creatures outside, but from those in the Sentinels. He can understand their need to protect themselves and their families first. Still, at least he was alive, even if it was the ass end of nowhere. Stuck here with stuck-up kids who had no idea what they were doing, keeping ancient machinery intact while occasionally defending it from unfortunate souls stuck in the wastes. At least it was something. And this is what's going to happen every day, Pax, from now until the end of your days, he said to himself. He took his cup of caf down in the hall to his office. They could ship him out here, but if they were going to pretend it was not to hide something, they had to make things look legit. So, he was one of the people in charge of the operation. Hey, Pax, how are you doing today? The always enthusiastic voice of his assistant, Styx, welcomed him. Hey, Styx. Quiet night as always. She rolled her eyes at the nickname, as she always did. Her real name was Carmen Brinks. And she was, in Pax's humble opinion, the best driver the regulators had ever had. At 22, she was young, and many of the instructors had held her back because of a lack of keeping to policies, but Pax hadn't seen a spark in her that many were lacking. Taking her as assistant had meant that she'd gotten a wealth of experience, and if things continued, would be out of here and back to Haven to join the ranks as an officer before the year was out. What made Styx stand out to Pax, however, was not her natural talent or the ways she disobeyed orders. It was Carmen did not need to be here. A couple of weeks into Carmen's posting, she had approached him with a favour to ask. Apparently her father had connections within the government and would be looking for her to pull her back into the family. Carmen wanted nothing to do with them, so Pax had altered her personnel file, altered her general description, and listed her as Styx, his name for her. Quiet as always, she returned. You know, I'm starting to think you like it that way. She smiled, turning back to her display. Oil on your cheek. Again, he whispered, moving back to his desk and tousling her pixie-cut hair, as a couple of the other officers and initiates in the room looked back at her. She blushed a little but grinned down at the table in spite of herself. As Pax took his place at the front of the room, he had a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Styx was one of the few things that made this punishment worthwhile. In the short time they had worked together, they had grown remarkably close, but he'd always held back from taking a chance on making it something more. One, because he didn't want to jeopardize her chances of climbing the ranks, both if there was any nuclear aspect to his own files, but also in case anyone thought she was getting preferential treatment. But really it was more because of the age gap between them and the life she still had ahead of her. He could not see her feeling the same way, which would just spoil one of the highlights of his time here. So, another day of quiet as always. He pulled himself back. Right. Maintenance logs, where are we at? He clapped his hands together. The noise from the alarm system interrupted the regular recitation of the well logs. Everyone looked around the room confused and shocked. The alarms had never gone off like that. Pax? A whisper through his comm link. Pax! It was hissed again. I read. What's going on? Stranded have got in. Someone had opened the doors. We're being overrun. There's many of them. All the guards are dead. Pax heard a shout of alert come over the comlink. I think they've seen me. You all need to... The comlink cut off, only static coming through. Everyone looked at Pax, waiting for instructions. You heard him. Arm up. We need to get out of here. Get out? We're gonna give this place to those savages? The security chief asked in disbelief. You heard him, Hills. They're in. We were never staffed enough to hold a well against the stranded in force, let alone if they got inside. Those walls and those doors were going to be impenetrable. If someone let them in, we don't know who to trust. Save the people in this room. We need to get out of here. Pax's tone was firm. Hills looked like he wanted to argue, but in the end he conceded. Our best bet is to make for the west garage. If we're quick, we might be able to get there before the stranded get too far into the facility. He pulled his blaster from its holster as he spoke. A couple of the security officers did the same. Pax accessed a security box behind the desk and pulled out a couple of more pistols, throwing one at Carmen and the other one at the other officer, who didn't look totally nonplussed by what was going on. What are you waiting for? Move! Pax was the first one out the door, leading the group of 14 quickly out into the corridor. And that's chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed it. A lot of stuff going on. And hope giving you guys actually characters who are gonna, be kind of more followed points. So so if it's confusing, I might have to rewrite some bits of it. So let me know what you think. Basically, the first bit, when we're coming in and we're getting told about Blenya, Remy is reading a book. Okay, the Book of the Lost. And then it goes to Remy's own whatever. So I thought it might be kind of a fun way of doing it. I tried to do it as I picture it. So, that's what's kind of going on there. But the rest of it, I kind of feel like, that's the things. The worms are like huge Leviathan-esque monstrosities that will devour everything. The Trumps are kind of cute-ish creatures. Think something like kind of big, hairy me, basically, but four-legged version with horns. But it's yeah, it's going well enough. I'm looking forward to kind of getting on to the next couple of chapters with you guys, but I hope you guys are enjoying it. There are bits and pieces for this that will change, like the prophecy bit in when Elin is talking to Remy about what they're looking for. That will likely change because it's going to play into a few other bits and pieces. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying it. I'm enjoying reading it. I really am, and I'm enjoying the writing again. Like even though I'm reading it, I'm kind of like reading it as I would read it anyway for a book anyway. So it's kind of nice. Which if I'm enjoying it, I'm hoping that takes a good sign. But I don't know if I'm enjoying it because I wrote it. I don't know. But I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. If you are, then please chuck some cheddar on that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, and continue to share the channel far and wide. I got plenty more writing to come. I've got at least 2 more chapters of this to a place where I'm happy to share it with you guys. I have taken the other 5 chapters I have written and basically just deleted them because I'm going to be rewriting them and taking them in a very different direction to what I was doing. But yes, I hope you guys are enjoying it. I've got tons more left to go for you for the next few Sundays. So this was a bit long. It's like an hour worth of recording, so I'll probably take it down to like 45 minutes, but I wasn't really expecting to do this long for it. But I guess it's an audiobook, so I mean, at least I'm in good company, I guess, with how long these kind of take. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, like I said, cheddar. Gotta share that cheddar. But have a great day. Have a great night. Have a great Sunday. Lots of that, folks. Stay chill out there. Bye-bye.